Hello, welcome to our channel from the Cloud Report. At the Open Infrastructure Summit some weeks ago, I heard a very, very inspiring talk from Kurt and Felix, and I'm happy to talk with them again. Welcome back, Felix and Kurt, from the SCS project. And the talk was about the fifth open paradigm. And the talk starts with the Fantastic Four. What are the Fantastic Four?
So, I mean, we've been doing open source for many, many years now. It's a very well-established way of developing technology together collaboratively, which I think really has transformed the way we do IT. And as we have grown as an open community, I think there's a few things we learned. And one of the things we learned is that with the success of open source, also companies invent models where things are some way half open and then marketed as open, and that makes them only half as useful. And what the open infrastructure community has come up with is the notion of the four opens, to really make sure as a community we are explicit when we do things in an open way, and that has those four elements: open source, open design, open development, open community. And when we talk about taking the first one, open source, it's important that we look at the complete software stack and make sure that all of its components have an OSI compliant license, are really open, and not just some parts are open and other parts are not, as you, for example, have in open core models. So we reject that. We want to make sure that the licenses gives all the rights to the recipients of the software to use the code for whatever she or he likes to have it. So that's the first one. Be really clear about open source. The other ones are more about the ability to develop, to participate in the development process. So if you want to consume open source software, it's important that you do not only have the right to receive software and then in some way use it, but also you typically want to, well, one of the advantages of open source is that you have the ability to participate in the development process, to shape it, to bring in your ideas, to report issues, to suggest improvements, and to have a reasonable chance that those are then discussed and can also then be integrated into the upstream open source projects. And that's what open development, open community, and open design are about: the ability for people to bring in ideas, to see, to understand the rationale behind decisions, and to contribute code. So we need an open community where you can participate in. We need a development process that's open where you can participate in, as well as design decisions that need to be taken in an open way, so you can see what kind of discussions, what considerations led to a decision, and you can participate in those discussions and also bring in your point of view and your maybe slightly different needs from what other users need. So that's the four opens.
The Fantastic Four actually allowed for everyone to create more value than one captures, which is a quote from Tim O'Reilly from 20 years ago. But that's basically a nice summary from me on how to view these.
So that sounds very thoughtful. Why do you think there's something missing?
I mean, we're not saying there's something missing, but one of the things we've learned working with complex distributed infrastructure that you have if you build cloud and container platforms is that having all the pieces, all the components, all of the software stack together as nicely openly developed open source software is not enough for you to be successful, because in the end, operating such systems, such platforms is very difficult to do. And I've seen major companies really struggle with that. And so what we have looked at is we looked at the challenges that companies have running such platforms and found out that really there is a missing missing piece with respect to having knowledge how to do the operations piece well. And then we kind of looked at the open source model. And I mean, if you run such modern platforms, you typically have DevOps teams that have development discipline integrated into team and people that are more focused on operations, and you link them together very closely. And we observed there's a mismatch, because in the development part of it, we have now 20, 30 years of experience how to organize collaborative working, sharing code with open source and open community, open development principles. On the operation side, we have not yet established such a strong methodology how we best share knowledge and make it accessible and allow people to benefit from that. And that observation has led us to kind of say, okay, in the operations part of the DevOps discipline, we need to do some work.
And that you called the fifth open paradigm, I guess.
Well, that is a suggestion from us. I mean, the four opens is a very well-established term in the open infrastructure community. And we believe there is the need for this openness in the operations place, which we would call open operations. And we believe it really would amend the existing four opens extremely well. Yes.
Yeah, the title was actually born out of a discussion that we had when we also submitted to the forum session during the Open Infra Summit, because we had an accompanying forum session together with the Red Hat guys that do the Operate First initiative. And when we discussed with them the proposal for the forum session, we somehow came up with the idea of actually referring to open operations as the fifth open paradigm.
But what do you mean by open operations? What is included, or what is needed in your?
Well, if you actually look at the SCS website, we have a quote there, which I'm actually reading it. By sharing and documenting best practices for operating such cloud stacks, the difficulty to provide high quality cloud services internally or publicly is vastly reduced, which basically boils down to what Kurt said about what comes after the open source part. And this consists of basically several things. I'm gonna actually show a graphic from the talks that we gave. So the tools part is mostly done by the open source. So you open source your operation tools, but the question that Kurt and I raised is just open sourcing the tools, dashboards, and all that. Is that already enough? And the tools part is only a third of the game, and actually the one that's a lot of times the most visible and the most prominent to talk about. But actually, none of the tools will do you any good if you don't have any good processes in place or good people culture. So you actually, well, good tools help, but good tools are only very good tools if you have also really good culture in the company, and same with processes. And if I refer to processes in this regard, I'm actually not talking processes that keep you tightly in place like railway tracks, but more like basically what's the English term? Rail guards on the side of the road that keep you on the road, but that still allow you to steer in the left and the right lane. And I illustrated that because basically, if you go down if you talk about people culture and processes, it becomes much more controversial than if you just talk about open sourcing tools. And one of the examples that Kurt and I presented in our talk was a case study that was done in hospitals and emergency room teams, and that boils into the culture aspect, especially the error culture. So if basically teams are more likely to admit errors, they become more efficient, which means they don't do more errors, they're just more likely to talk about it, and as such have the ability to learn from them. And so building a healthy error culture, for example, is a big part of the game. And but that's also nothing that each and every company should do in private and hidden away from everyone else, but instead basically talk about it and foster the knowledge about how to foster such a culture with everyone else, because everyone else gains from it.
So, and maybe there's one additional aspect. I mean, I really like the picture, by the way, Felix, with the triangle tools, processes, people. I mean, it's really what we always have in companies, that you have people, you have resources that can be easily changed and allocated to something new, and then you have processes that have a longer change on a longer period of changing and are more difficult to adjust. And then in the end, you have like the values, the company culture. That's the most difficult to change and to adjust to new challenges. And we have certainly the same with this open operations topic. One additional aspect, I mean, what we're trying to do with Sovereign Cloud Stack is we're trying to build this network of people that work together, this network of providers, internal providers, public cloud providers, and try to see that we can make them work together in a way that with all of them together, they can actually build an alternative to some of the largest tech companies in the world. And what we, in our mind, would be nice to see is an ecosystem of these providers to be able to succeed together. And in order to do that, all of these companies need to have a lot of knowledge, and not all of these companies are very large. So building that kind of knowledge, getting all the skilled people aboard will not be possible for small companies. By sharing some of the knowledge, not only in the development of a platform, but also in operating the platform, we make it actually possible for smaller players to participate and to be successful. You don't need to be huge in order to run a cloud platform, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the approach we're taking here.
And that sounds very challenging to bring or to open their own processes and to talk about failure or internal challenges. You talk to several people. How do they react on this new idea or the fifth paradigm? And do you have answers for them? Why this is the right way to operate?
Very good question. And I think the observation you just made, that the error culture and being open and transparent with errors is an extremely important thing to be successful. And at the same time, it's difficult if you come from a culture that does not maybe support that as much. So that's a difficult cultural change indeed. And I think we need to be honest. I mean, we are in an early stage of this open operations movement. So we certainly don't have all the answers yet. And certainly it's not yet mainstream for companies to work that way in operations. But I mean, we have started to build our community around that, and we are having success. We're having discussions with people, and we have been able to convince people. And certainly, I mean, there are some positive examples where companies have made mistakes and things have gone wrong, and there have been whatever platform outages. And actually, by the way they have worked through this internally and tried to learn from that, and then also shared the knowledge and the learnings they made with the audience, with the public, with their customers. I think that has been a very positive approach in the end, because it allowed customers to actually re-establish trust and see, okay, things have gone wrong, things have maybe terribly gone wrong, but we have an organization that has really been very careful in analyzing all the aspects, has fully analyzed the issues and has learned from that, and has been nice enough to share most of the learnings with the public. And for me personally, I think that would be what I would need to reestablish trust after something has gone wrong. And we have two incidences that we have actually shared here with links, one from Azure, actually from 2012, and one from the Open Telecom Cloud, where they have done that in a really nice way. I think there's also been a recent thing with, who was it?
Cloudflare.
Cloudflare, thanks.
Yeah, just a week and a half ago, and we should add that to a future slide set. I would actually like, because I like your question, Frederica, I would like to take it a bit into first a technical, but then a philosophical view. And for that, I'm going to show a slide. This is a slide from a tool that is called Openstack Health Monitor, which is a tool that Kurt developed a few years ago that we currently use to monitor our SCS environments from externally. And we basically just use the user credentials to spawn VMs and measure the time and do SSH to these VMs and all that. And basically, we have the idea of providing some sort of a dashboard that is also publicly available, because we only do what customers could do. However, we already noticed that that raises concerns here and there, because it's basically, of course, shows very fine-grained information on how fast a certain environment is and all that. And that's the technical part. The philosophical part is that basically companies that provide cloud environments are worried that this could be used against them, because customers would start saying, hey, here you were slower than anticipated and all that. And ideally, and that's, I know, very idealistic, or a very idealistic standpoint that I have, is that this also, on the long run, changes the way that customers interact with service providers, because the customers know that the service provider is being transparent, and that also does a culture shift on the customer side, who doesn't try to basically go into a conflict with the service provider each and every time they see a small dip or whatever, because but that's, I know, very idealistic, but I think a valid viewpoint on that.
So you want to provide for open operations or tools, but also best practices or open communication and a base for community growth in operations area.
And sparks a discussion among the communities on how to foster this further. So it's, yeah.
I really liked the idea at the summit. After your talk, I thought it is obvious that this part is needed, but I think to implement this idea is it will be a long way, but yeah, I really like it, and I think it's to become a real DevOps and real open collaboration from development and operations. This part is needed, in my opinion. So great. How did the Open Infra Foundation react? Do they adopt the idea?
So we did get some positive feedback. I mean, Alison came up after the talk, and Alison Randall, and said how much she liked the idea. I think, I mean, positioning it as the fifth open is something that we try to kind of connect it to the already existing 4 ones, which seems logical. to get some adoption, that everybody say, okay, this is the official fifth open. I think that's a longer community discussion. That's not something that by having a few people like it, or by maybe having the Open Infra board like it, that's not going to happen that way. I think that's a longer discussion, and we need to kind of build up the community that works that way and show it can be done successfully. It helps people that are in operations to be successful. And once we have done that, I think we would actually have the discussion, okay, is this now something that is really the official fifth open in this list of important opens? So I think that's a longer term process. And for us, it's most important to get the idea out, to start those discussions, to get enthusiastic people that want to contribute to that, to also kind of get operations people more at the center of the discussions, because sometimes, or at some companies, treat the engineers that are responsible for operations not as well as they should be. They don't send them enough to conferences or to locations where they could have those discussions. So we're trying to get them out and have that knowledge made available and have those discussions.
So good luck. We will go this way together, I think. Thank you for your time, and thank you for clearing some of my questions about the fifth paradigm. Thank you so much.
More than welcome.
Thanks a lot, Friederike. It's been a pleasure.